It may sound like a strange way to start a video, but this wasn't a documentary that I wanted to make. At least not at first. This was a documentary that a lot of people requested, and I took on the task because I knew it could be a huge opportunity for my channel. Once I actually sat down to work on the video, I had no idea where to take it. My instincts told me that I should make an expose, that I should find every clip of Amy saying something racist or offensive and juxtapose it against her current political rhetoric. But the more I considered that option, the less appealing it became. There is a broader story of hypocrisy and fraud that you can't see when you only look at Amy through the lens of joke theft compilations on YouTube. If you want to understand the full scope of Amy's manufactured persona, then you have to follow the progression of her career, from opening for D-list comics to starring in her own TV show and movies. Amy has reinvented herself more times in 10 years than most comics do in their entire career. Accompanying the drastic shifts in style were increasingly desperate attempts at political activism that alienated large parts of her audience. In this documentary, I will try to lay out the evolution of Amy Schumer, both as a comedian and a figure in the various political and social movements that she's attached her name to. This necessitates the making of more than one video, so I can properly address the whole story. In part 1, I will be looking at her comedy career, how her style has changed over the years, and what led to one of the worst comedy specials of all time. And yes, that means you will have to watch a lot of Amy Schumer's stand-up comedy, but I had to suffer through them, so you will too.
You're gonna watch it!
The most logical place to begin our exploration of Amy's career would be the beginning, of course. Unfortunately, very few recordings of Amy's early stand-up exist on the internet. The only examples I could find were clips from her set on Live at Gotham in 2007, but they do give us a small window into what her early style was like.
Then I dated a deaf guy. He couldn't hear. That's what that means. And it was awesome though, honestly, ladies. No faking orgasms. I'd just be like, "You're doing great."
The first thing you may notice is her general demeanor on stage. She's very energetic, sometimes to the point that she seems desperate for the audience's approval. She punctuates almost every joke with a gesticulation or head movement taken directly from the Jim Norton School of Physical Comedy.
I love her child so much. She says I'm acting like she's mine now. Just because I'm always like over there, you know, and buying her things. Like, even if I feed her, she gets mad. I'm like, who cares whose breast it is? She's hungry, you know?
Her routine is also fairly mild. There are jokes about sex and her appearance, but they are nowhere near as vulgar and repulsive as they would be in later years. In a word, she is generic. At this time, she was interchangeable with so many other bland female comics who talk about relationships and the difference between men and women. This would change over the next 2 to 3 years, as Amy's routine became increasingly offensive in nature. Videos from 2009 provide a window into the metamorphosis while it was still underway.
And my friends never know when I'm drunk, except the only way you can tell is I slur. Like, I say racial slurs, and that shit gets weird. I'm so not racist, guys. My best friend fucked a black guy once, so trust me. No, honestly, my best friend is African American, and it's cool because right now she's teaching me how to like freestyle rap, which I'm pretty good at, and I'm teaching her how to freestyle swim.
Although she was incorporating jokes about race into her act, she was still in the process of reining in her mugging and overly energetic delivery. During this phase of her career, we see what is, as far as I know, the earliest example of Amy's so-called parallel thinking.
It dawned on me that I don't see it in colors. I don't. In high school, I went out with this Chinese girl for a while once. I didn't even know she was Chinese. I thought, I don't know, maybe really tired, you know? No, seriously, I felt bad.
The most non-racist person in the world. That's definitely not a word, right? But anyway, like here's an example. I was at this fancy party, and Michelle Kwan walks in. She tells me out of nowhere that Oliver Stone, the director, has this huge Asian fetish. And she was like, and I find it totally offensive. And I was like, why, Kwan? I was like, what's up, you know? She's like, well, I'm Asian. And I was like, See, I didn't even notice that. I thought you were just like really tired.
By 2010, it appeared that the transition was complete. Her routine was now far more edgy and offensive in nature, to the point that her first album, Cutting, ended with a joke about her sister being a cutter.
You guys have been so cool. I've had such a great weekend here. I'm going to leave you with this. My sister, my younger sister, used to cut herself.
Amy would also add more racial jokes to her repertoire, including a joke about all Asians looking alike, and several jokes made at the expense of Mexicans.
I was dating a Hispanic guy. They were like so neat. He was like really like tidy for a guy. Like he would clean up right away, you know, no matter where he got it on me. He's Hispanic, so he was like, now who's the wetback? I'm like, hey! Still you.
I know this is like saying that Revenge of the Sith is the best Star Wars prequel, but I think Cutting is Amy's best release to date. There are certainly a lot of low points. Amy's jokes about drinking and having sex are easily the album's shortcoming, and largely feel like filler in between the edgy jokes, some of which aren't half bad. I don't want to praise Amy too much, but there are actually jokes on this album that are pretty offensive and get a good reaction from the crowd. What I find particularly interesting about this album is that, in addition to the change in subject matter, there is a change in Amy's delivery and onstage persona. On Cutting, she is aloof and smug, or at least trying to appear that way. Her delivery is less energetic and more deadpan, with many of her punchlines taking the form of one-liners, misdirection, or comments uttered under her breath.
That reminds me, my good friend Kristen, her cat just died. Right? So I call her and I was like, Chris, I'm so sorry. I heard about, Al Roker, her cat's name. I was like, what happened, Car? She was like, AIDS. I was like, I didn't even know your cat was gay.
She had reinvented herself to a large degree. That reinvention apparently paid off because Amy's career started to blossom during this period. From a half-hour set on Comedy Central Presents to an appearance on the What the Fuck podcast with Mark Maron, considerably more material featuring Amy Schumer becomes available from 2010 onward. Most significantly, I think, were her appearances on the Opie and Anthony show. The argument could be made that being on O&A in early 2010 helped push her career to the next level. The die-hard fans had a reputation for buying tickets to see performers who appeared on the show, and other comedians like Louis C.K., Bill Burr, and Patrice O'Neal saw huge boosts to their career after becoming regular guests on O&A. While it may be hard to believe now, there was a time when Amy was popular with the violent, card-carrying white supremacists that made up the Opie and Anthony fanbase. As an aside, Amy's Wikipedia page no longer references her appearances on Opie and Anthony or The Black Phillip Show. I find this interesting considering they were referenced on older versions of her article, and I can't imagine a justification for their removal, but I digress. The Opie and Anthony show was well known for its rampantly racist and sexist style of humor. This was in large part due to the extremist views of Anthony Cumia, a domestic abuser and proponent of eugenics. Cumia would eventually be fired from satellite radio after taking creep shots of a black woman in Times Square and going on a Twitter tirade in which he claimed African Americans weren't people. He would then go on to start his own podcast network that featured the likes of Gavin McInnes and Alex Jones.
There's a great thing going around in some circles that I have sex with transsexuals.
In retrospect, I can see why Schumer would no longer wish to be associated with Opie and Anthony, but during the time she appeared on the show, she had no problem with their incredibly offensive style of comedy, and even appeared to share some of Anthony Cumia's views on race.
There's a horrible gig there. Tracy's at the Bowman in Towson, Maryland. Off 695.
Really?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Great. Can you get it? Can you get me in?
Was it racially diverse?
Yeah. Not. I haven't been racially diverse.
No.
But it was. Yeah.
Thank God.
I just don't want my stock to go down.
Yeah. They call that damaged goods.
Is that what they call it? I'm trying to keep my stock up.
You're not damaged goods, right?
All like
No,
us.
not no.
She's still good.
I've never gone to the dark side. I've thought about it.
Amy made quite a few appearances on Opie and Anthony over the years, but they are largely interchangeable. They fawned over her appearance and threw her softball questions about sex and relationships. Anthony Cumia and Jim Norton would cackle like desperate virgins at every joke she was recycling from her act.
I still, I'm almost 30, but I'm stuck in the mentality of oh, you got knocked up, huh? And they're like, no, I'm married and ready. I'm just like, what are you going to do about it? But yeah.
Yeah, don't you love when they, all your friends just kind of pass you by in that maturity part of life?
Yeah, and I am not there.
No.
I'm like, what, you have a house? What?
Yeah.
I'm like, aren't we getting blacked out tonight? I don't understand.
What happened?
I don't understand at all.
At this point, Amy had cultivated a recognizable image as the cute girl who could hang with the boys and make offensive jokes. It may not be the most original identity, but it would take Amy very far. The first major turning point was her high-profile appearance on the Comedy Central roast of Charlie Sheen. Amy had initially applied to be a writer for the roast, but was given a role as one of the roasters instead, a position she would take full advantage of with an especially vicious barb aimed at Jackass star Steve-O.
But I truly am, no joke, sorry for the loss of your friend Ryan Dunn. I know you must have been thinking it could have been me, and I know we were all thinking, why wasn't it?
The joke was a perfect illustration of how far Amy was willing to veer into the territory of tasteless, shock value humor. The controversy following the joke brought her even more publicity, and even led to a minor feud with Steve-O. Despite allegedly receiving death threats from Jackass fans, Amy refused to apologize for her ruthless joke. Given the attention her role drew to the roast of Charlie Sheen, it was no surprise that she would return to the dais in 2012 for the roast of Roseanne Barr. 2012 would continue to be a boom year for Amy, as she landed her first full-length special, Mostly Sex Stuff. It should have been titled Mostly Jokes Recycled from My First Album, because I would say that between 70 and 90% of the jokes on Mostly Sex Stuff are rehashed nearly verbatim from cutting.
This French guy, I don't know. He was so sensual. We were kissing and he started to pick me up.
He did. He gave up right away because he's French, I guess. And oh my God, thank you. So we're making out, and I'm classy, and he can tell, so out comes his dick, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? Are we having a pillow fight? Why is the gnome from Travelocity in your underpants?
Repeating a few jokes from a previous album isn't necessarily bad, but you shouldn't rehash almost an entire album, especially when many of the jokes from Amy's first album had been rehashed from her episode of Comedy Central Presents and had been told on a variety of platforms.
I've got something really big going on. I finally just slept with my high school crush. You guys, I finally just slept with my high school crush. I finally just slept with my high school crush.
I finally just slept with my high school crush.
Now he expects me to go to his graduation.
Honestly, I think Amy's first special was a formality. It was a way to legitimize her as a real comedian before she was placed at the forefront of mainstream productions. Inside Amy Schumer may have launched in 2013, but if it was like any other TV shows, talks were going on months or even years before the show officially began. Inside Amy Schumer is an interesting case because it got off to a relatively strong start in a predominantly male demographic. However, by the third season, ratings had fallen off dramatically. The show also generally received middling reviews from fans and critics, while its contemporary Key and Peele received critical acclaim. Beyond ratings and reception, Inside Amy Schumer never managed to achieve the rewatchable nature of classic sketch shows. Sketches from Monty Python and Chappelle's Show are gilded artifacts of comedy, and clips from Key and Peele have attained view counts comparable to music videos. Even re-uploads to auxiliary channels that have only been up for a few weeks are outpacing clips from Inside Amy Schumer that have been up for years. Most of you could quote 10 lines from Monty Python, Chappelle's Show, or Key and Peele off the top of your head, but I challenge you to post one line from Inside Amy Schumer in the comments. The few sketches from Inside Amy Schumer that are remembered for the wrong reasons. The show is now inexorably linked to accusations of joke theft, after videos promoted by the Opie and Anthony subreddit showed multiple examples of sketches from Inside Amy Schumer copying Mad TV, College Humor, and the jokes of comedians like Kathleen Madigan and Tammy Pescatelli. Amy Schumer and her pet elephant shrew have categorically denied the accusations of joke theft, but it's doubtful they did anything to bolster the viewership of sketches that were already withering on the vine long before any accusations were made. If Inside Amy Schumer had been the peak of Amy's career, she probably would have faded into irrelevance after the cancellation of the show. But thanks to the efforts of genetic freak athlete Judd Apatow, she became the pernicious weed of comedy that we know today. Furthering my speculation that Amy's mainstream push was in the works long before 2013 is the fact that Apatow discovered Amy through a 2011 episode of The Howard Stern Show and immediately knew he wanted to make a movie with her. The movie would end up being the box office hit Trainwreck. What I find marginally interesting about Trainwreck is that, according to Apatow, Schumer initially had a different idea for the script that he called a high-concept comedy. Considering the entire plot of any Judd Apatow film is explained in the title, his interpretation of high-concept comedy might be a bit generous. Either way, he told Amy to write another script about relationships and breakups because those are the only movies he knows how to direct. Judd Apatow movies aren't my cup of tea, but I guess Trainwreck isn't half bad. Amy Schumer is probably the worst part of the movie because she has the charisma of irritable bowel syndrome. It's also pretty apparent that she isn't a very natural actor when you compare her performance to that of John Cena and even LeBron James. Cena and James actually steal the show at many points, and to Trainwreck's credit, the movie has a few genuinely funny moments. However, it's hard to know whether the lines from the movie that succeed were entirely from Amy's script, came from revisions to the script that might have occurred during production, or were improv'd on set and stitched together in editing.
I wrote it, and then Judd was really encouraging me to keep writing, and then we kind of worked on the script for the next year until we shot, all throughout shooting.
And she's an amazing writer. I mean, it really is more editing through all of her amazing thoughts and trying to help her understand some of the structure of it.
Which is why I can't really use this movie as a mark for or against Amy Schumer. Movies aren't like stand-up comedy. They're complex machines, and the outcome is usually the result of several hundred people working towards a common goal. You can't pin the success or failure of a movie on one person unless there's some kind of megalomaniac who controls every aspect of the production. On the other hand, stand-up comedy is much more about an individual person's thoughts, opinions, and insight into the world. In many cases, stand-up comedy doesn't even need a visual element to succeed. Before Netflix started handing out specials to every screeching grimace impersonator or condescending Romeo dialer with an unpronounceable name, most comedians had to record comedy albums until they could get their first special. You can increase the production value if you want, but at the end of the day, it's still one person talking into a microphone. Whatever the result may be, the responsibility falls on that one person alone. For that reason, it was interesting to see Amy return with a new special in 2015. 3 years had passed since the release of Mostly Sex Stuff, during which we entered another dark period, where there is little video evidence of Amy performing stand-up. It could be that Amy was taking a break from stand-up while working on TV and film, but I think she was also in the process of reinventing herself for the second time. When she returned to stand-up in 2015 with her special, Live at the Apollo, her style had once again changed dramatically. For one thing, she had dropped the jokes about race. This could have been in response to criticism her earlier material received, but her new material generally lacked any of the edginess that was present in her previous outings. To fill the gap left by removing her offensive material, Amy doubled down on jokes about her sex life and alcoholism.
The whole reason I got tickets to the game, he gave me these seats because he thought I was mad at him for sexually harassing me, which I wasn't. Like, I'm 33. I really appreciate that shit right now. So he gives me this like questionnaire. He's like, okay, how many drinks do you have in a week? So I'm like, 36. And he's like, no alcohol. And I'm like, no alcohol.
On top of that, she started joking about her weight and insatiable appetite.
And like, that's the secret I found out. Like, that's Hollywood's secret. They don't put food in their faces. And that's not an option for me. Like, I was born weighing 150. Like, I just came out swinging, like, give me linguine, ma.
I think this is a bigger turning point than most people realize. A major facet of Schumer's old persona was being the pretty girl who would say offensive things and could hang with the guys. In Live at the Apollo, she removed the edgy material and was portraying herself as a gluttonous, alcoholic slob. I know a large part of comedy is hyperbole and exaggeration, but objectively, Amy isn't that overweight. She certainly isn't the going to die before my kid is a teenager sized fatso that she pretends to be in her more recent work. If you listen to these albums back to back like I did, the change is startling. You're left wondering what happened between 2012 and 2015. I have two theories. The first is related to the very nature of women in stand-up comedy. Personally, I think women are every bit as capable of being funny as men are. However, there is a specific type of female comic that has been plaguing comedy for years.
Oh, hey, guess what? There's a young girl that's middling attractive that swears a lot. Let's get her. What? Is that the new fucking thing?
Yeah.
Sarah Silverman, hysterical.
Right.
Who's funnier than her?
Nobody.
No, except dudes. But,
Nobody.
but I think she spawned these other ladies. That they forget that she's funny, and they think the whole point is just to be
semi-hot,
attractive, and then talk about sucking cock. And
you got to show
shit.
a lot of leg. You got to show a lot of leg with little skirts on, and then talk about sucking cock and manipulating balls with your hand, and it's hysterical.
Schumer is evidence that a Long Island 6 telling offensive jokes can take you extremely far, but that style doesn't have the best longevity. As Patrice O'Neal once said, "Pussy age like bread." By the time most of these women hit 30, the act has worn out its appeal, and they have to reinvent themselves. An example that I find very relevant to this documentary is the story of Bonnie McFarlane. She predated Amy's appearance on the Opie and Anthony show by several years, and leaned heavily on the gimmick of being the pretty girl who said offensive things.
Patrice orders lobster and steak. Lobster's $23 a pound there.
Yeah.
But you got you a nice gift.
You got me nothing.
Patrice didn't get you anything?
No, you know what? He should be beaten with a bat. Nothing.
Nigger.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
She never achieved the same success that Schumer did, and in her 30s, Bonnie tried to reinvent herself as a wife and mother. When that didn't work either, she dove headfirst into feminism. In 2014, she donned her investigative journalism hat for the movie Women Aren't Funny, to find out once and for all if women are funny.
I'm female comedian Bonnie McFarlane, and I've heard women aren't funny almost as often as you're not funny.
During the movie, Bonnie attempted to do a set while pretending to be a man.
I used to always carry a man purse, a merce. You ever carry one of those? A merce. I loved it. I loved that merce. But I was losing it. I'd lose it everywhere. I was always leaving my merce around. You know, I kept losing my merce. So I just started carrying everything, my person, my pants. I only lost my pants a couple of times. So that's really working out.
And it went so badly she had an existential crisis and needed to be consoled by her hamster pod husband, Rich Voss.
That was good. No, that was good. Don't be upset.
I just didn't be a comic.
No, listen.
I can't do it as a man. I can't do it as a woman.
You were great. You were great.
Since then, she has basically been relegated to posting generic, blue checkmark political views on Twitter. Amy hasn't reached that point yet, but her ever-increasing political activism and the drastic shift in material feels like an attempt to escape her expiration date. That being said, I think there is a difference between Amy Schumer and other women who have utilized the archetype of the pretty girl with a potty mouth. When she attempted to change gears, she didn't just start writing different material. On Live at the Apollo, her delivery and stage persona were considerably different than they were on Cutting and mostly sex stuff. This was before the accusations of joke theft, so it's difficult to envision a reason her stand-up style would change so drastically in 3 years. What could have happened in 2013 that would have had such a massive impact. It wasn't like she broke up with a comedy writer. In an April 2013 interview with Cosmo, Schumer revealed that she had broken up with her on and off again boyfriend of 4 years, Anthony Jeselnik. I'm not saying definitively that Anthony was writing jokes for Amy while they were dating, but let's look at the evidence. First of all, it lines up perfectly with the timeline we've already established. When they started dating in 2009, Amy's material became much more offensive and edgy. She adopted a narcissistic and aloof stage persona, not unlike the character Jeselnik utilizes in his act. Many of her jokes also took the form of one-liners and misdirection that Anthony is famous for.
I think that having a baby is a lot like playing the lottery, because more than anyone else, Latinos love it.
I mean, nothing works 100% of the time, right? Except Mexicans.
Then, after they broke up, she went back to the drawing board and didn't put out another special until she returned with a style that resembled a low-quality female version of Louis C.K.'s I'm a Fat, Aging Schlub routine. It doesn't help Amy's case that Jeselnik was more than happy to write for other comedians. Anthony has stated on multiple occasions that the reason he got into comedy in the first place was to become a comedy writer. He even worked as a writer for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon for a period, but his pitches were constantly shut down, prompting Anthony to leave in 2010. Then he went on to write for the Comedy Central roasts. I'm sure it's purely coincidental that a joke Jeselnik made about Jeff Ross at the Comedy Central roast of Donald Trump is strikingly similar to Schumer's infamous joke about Steve-O at the Charlie Sheen roast.
It's been a rough year for comedy. Not only did the world lose Greg Giraldo, but even worse, it kept Jeff Ross.
But I truly am, no joke, sorry for the loss of your friend Ryan Dunn. I know you must have been thinking it could have been me, and I know we were all thinking, why wasn't it? Thank you.
The same roast that boosted Amy's profile into the mainstream when she was turned down as a writer and given a gig as a roaster, which is the story of Amy's career. She is an actor or a presenter, not a writer. That was not enough for Amy, though. She wanted to be Dave Chappelle instead of Jimmy Fallon, but Chappelle's show had 2 writers, while Inside Amy Schumer had 10, and according to Kurt Metzger, she didn't even write for her own show. At least that was the explanation he gave to defend against accusations that sketches from Inside Amy Schumer had been stolen.
But hold on a second, in their defense, they're looking at a film that shows time after time bits
that Gavin made to specifically fuck her because she said, I play a racist Republican.
What?
The little YouTube video where they took movies, fucking the show, which, by the way, she doesn't write the show. It was ridiculous, and it was exactly what the fucking SJWs did to me.
I don't want to spend too much time comparing Amy's allegedly stolen jokes and sketches to those of other comedians in sketch shows. There is already a 26-minute long video on YouTube that does exactly that. Additionally, I think the reaction to the allegations of joke theft are more interesting than the stolen jokes themselves. Can you think of a single comedian who didn't repeat the official story when Amy was accused? Let alone anyone who directly accused her of stealing their jokes. The closest examples I know of were Kathleen Madigan, Wendy Liebman, and Tammy Pescatelli. In mid-January of 2016, Pescatelli, Liebman, and Madigan had a conversation on Twitter where they compared the similarities their jokes shared with jokes that appeared in Schumer's show and movies. Tammy was the most openly accusatory. However, Tammy quickly changed her story. By the next day, she was publicly apologizing, like somebody left a dead fish on her doorstep.
So look, this is it. I said what I said. It is probably, parallel thinking. That does happen. I'm no genius on this. I'm not breaking any new ground, as I've witnessed time and time again during my shows, and especially on the internet in the past couple of days. But I think what you guys do know about me is that I'm a loyal friend. And I think what I did is get involved in something. I was the last to the party, and I drank the most and was the loudest. And that is really what I probably should have just kind of stayed out of it and kept my mouth shut.
It wouldn't be shocking if only smaller comedians were standing by her side, but even superstars haven't spoken up. She seems to possess a level of power and influence that makes even veteran comics think twice about saying anything other than positive about her. Hannibal Buress went after Bill Cosby, but danced around the conversation when he was talking to Joe Rogan.
What is your take on all this Amy Schumer shit?
I don't know. I've been looking at it. I don't think she would take jokes. And a lot of the jokes that, I think it's just more, it's one of those things where it seems like it's crazy, but it's not as crazy because we're just the same way.
We're deep in it.
We're deep in it, and it's our world. You know what I mean?
By far, Joe Rogan is the worst offender in this scenario. It's one thing for a spineless worm like Jim Norton to toe the line for a more successful comedian who has the power to breathe life into his fading comedy career.
I'm being accused of stealing jokes, and I wanted to come and talk to you about it and clear my name because I would never, ever do that, and I never have. And I'm literally going to take a polygraph test and put it on my show this season. And I promise whatever the results are, I won't let them cut. I will show that I had never seen Patrice do that bit. I had definitely never seen Tammy Pescatelli do that. Like, I didn't happen to catch her 2006 Comedy Central special and like sit on that bit till I got a movie. Like, I sat on that bit for 9 years and then was like, here's my chance to steal that Tammy, the famous Tammy P bit. I had never.
So what do you think it is? Do you think that people are coming after you because you've hit a certain level? I noticed that people get really mad, and Lou is saying that this is distorting just a teeny bit. So Lou, just tell me what to do. It's almost like you took a stance on guns, and that offended a lot of people's with how they felt about guns. And what kind of prompted you to do that?
However, Joe is the guy who tried and arguably succeeded in ruining Carlos Mencia's career, all because Mencia's birth name was Ned and he stole a joke from Bill Cosby. Nevertheless, when presented with multiple accusations against Amy Schumer, Joe was more than willing to give her the benefit of doubt.
So she might not have had any knowledge at all that those other bits existed. Like, there's so much content out there today. To be aware of every premise and every bit is almost impossible. So you take away those sketches and you go, well, I don't necessarily think you can make her responsible for those sketches because there's no way. Like, if you were going to do your show and you had a premise that somebody pitched you, what are you going to do? You're going to go online and say, hey, has anybody heard this premise before? You're not going to do that. Did she know about the Mad TV one? Who the fuck watched Mad TV? I never watched it.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch it?
I watched some of it, but not...
Maybe twice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how they were on for 100 years. Mad TV was on forever. Like, how could you know all the sketches? Yeah, I don't know, man. It's not good. Weird. It's not good, but it's also there's like this momentum that's a part of it now. It's like a feeding frenzy.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some of it is the tall poppy syndrome, right?
Yeah.
People want to knock her down because she's taken off so high. But objectively, stay away from that. Look at the whole thing objectively. There's an originality problem. 100%. There's definitely an originality problem. The problem is, whose problem is that? And it sucks, man. It sucks to watch all the blood in the water, it sucks to see like her big moment, all this great shit happened to her, and all of a sudden now it's all this chaos. I don't know, man.
It's definitely dicey. I mean, Amy's a close friend, so it is dicey to
exactly.
It's just a weird thing.
That's exactly why it's weird.
Yeah,
because I like her a lot, but it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate.
The only definite stance he was able to take was that her show had an originality problem. Maybe Joe Rogan has changed his opinions about joke theft over the years. If that were the case, why hasn't he retracted his previous statements about Carlos Mencia? Or at least amended them with his more nuanced take on joke stealing? As far as I know, Joe has never expressed any remorse for the way he treated Mencia, so the only conclusion that any reasonable person can draw is that Joe is a hypocrite who has different rules for his friends.
Right, he's not like you. in Mencia.
That was the worst I've ever seen, though. I've seen plagiarists before. I've seen guys get away with stealing other people's shit, but I've never seen someone that blatant. He was a bully about it. Like, he would do your shit. He would go on in front of you and do your shit. Like, he would bring you up at the store and do your closing bit before he brought you up.
Is the popcorn really that delicious we must shovel handfuls of it into our mouth?
Like one piece at a time, you know, and then like you get a little more real, right? And then eventually you just like you get real, and it's just
I've seen plagiarists before. I've seen guys get away with stealing other people's shit, but I've never seen someone that blatant.
An entire video could be made breaking down all of the inconsistencies and hypocrisies Joe displayed while defending Amy. But what is truly frustrating is that Joe is just one part of a larger problem. He may be the worst example because he had the power to stand up to Amy, but the entire comedy world turned a blind eye. Who knows how differently Amy's career would have turned out if more comedians, especially powerful comedians like Rogan, had been willing to call a spade a spade. Maybe it would have accelerated the spread of animosity towards Amy that audiences have been expressing lately. Her recent special, dubbed The Leather Special, was so poorly received that it spawned conspiracy theory that Netflix discontinued their rating system to protect her. I don't believe that to be true, but I can understand why some people might. Live at the Apollo was a step down from Amy's previous work, but The Leather Special is crumpled up at the bottom of the stairs with a broken neck. It's so much worse than her other specials that it is hard to comprehend. If you didn't know who Amy Schumer was, you would assume this was her first time headlining. It feels like she had 10 minutes of material, and right before she went on stage, she realized it was an hour-long special.
Mark, we want to do snow angels in it. Yay! Yay!
Every joke is either about sex or Amy being a big fat pig who has a disgusting pussy.
Your tits. My titties. Come, pussies. It's really like, my pussy.
I'm not bothered or offended by blue humor, but some of the jokes in this special are so gross that I wonder who they were intended for.
Is there anything bad about cum? I can't think of anything. Oh, wait, I just thought of something. If you got even a drop of it in your mouth the rest of the day, you're going,
Crass depictions of sex were a fundamental factor in Amy's appeal to her target audience of young women who like to party and get laid. But The Leather Special is basically an Adam Sandler movie without the racism. I just don't see many women in their 20s and 30s enjoying 50-plus minutes of semen and diarrhea jokes.
Machine gun shitting out of my ass. Just violent diarrhea.
As bad as the jokes are, the way she tells them is even worse. Amy has always possessed the timing of a miscarriage, but it was less noticeable when she was telling fairly short jokes and one-liners. Now she tells rambling stories that don't have a beginning or ending, just a midsection as flabby and confusing as her own. At the beginning of the show, she starts a directionless string of ideas that stumble into one another for what feels like an eternity. I don't want to nitpick The Leather Special because this video would be 8 hours long, but I have one particular complaint. Amy has a huge problem ending bits. Instead of ending the bits with a final punchline and moving on to the next joke or story, she says one punchline.
My pussy smells like a small barnyard animal.
Then she'll make a strange face or noise.
Okay?
Then she'll give her runner-up punchline.
Small, not like a big fucked up llama, like chewing and spitting and reeking. No! A little, like a goat.
Followed by some more physical comedy, and the process repeats itself until she just trails off and starts something new.
You buy the food pellets, you know, and you feed it, and it's like, ugh, and you're like, I ate it. You know, you don't go like, ew, I want to get to a sink kind of soon. Kind of soon would be good. It does smell.
Watching the leather special was kind of a profound experience for me. It shows how important it is for any artist or entertainer to keep people around who are willing to criticize them, to point out when they're making an incredibly embarrassing and possibly career-altering mistake. You could almost feel bad for Amy if you forget that she is a narcissist who can't handle the slightest criticism and probably got rid of anyone who was willing to call her out on her bullshit. When even other famous comedians are afraid to call Amy out, I can't imagine any of the people filming, editing, or producing this turd were going to tell her what a turd it was, unless they liked the idea of selling bodily fluids to pay their rent. Netflix probably didn't give a shit either. They gave Amy a raise after she complained that Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock were making more money than her. They're even giving her a second special despite the catastrophically bad reviews that the leather special received. In that light, it's not surprising that so many people think Amy Schumer was the reason Netflix got rid of their rating system. Maybe Netflix believed Amy's ridiculous claims that the alt-right was behind the hundreds of one-star reviews, even though most of the negative reviews I came across were from fans of Amy Schumer, who were wondering what the fuck happened to her. The fact that Amy's mind would even go to the alt-right when she was looking for someone to blame says a lot about the way she sees herself and the increasingly political nature of her public persona. It's an idea that I would like to explore in the second part of this documentary. How did Amy Schumer become so political in recent years? And why is she a fixture of feminist and progressive circles when she has a long history of racist, homophobic, and ableist humor? As always, I want to thank you guys for watching, as well as liking and subscribing. The support you guys give me is a huge motivator to keep making videos, especially considering this one has probably been the hardest so far. About halfway through writing the documentary, there was a pretty dramatic shift in the direction I was taking it, which is why there will be more than one video, as opposed to the initial plan of one video. Which is why, if you are familiar with Amy Schumer, there is probably a lot that you noticed was missing from this one, because a lot of them will show up in the next video, as they pertain more to her political activism, or maybe more accurately, political missteps, and also her general public image, her hypocrisy, her entitlement, and a variety of other issues that I will talk about in the next video. So if you're interested in that, I hope you check out part 2. Of course, I would also like to thank my supporters on Patreon, who really help make these videos possible. So thank you. Unfortunate Mishap, Lara Williams, Mersh, Adam Carey, Danny, SF69er, Ryan Kyo, Jeff Carpenter, Dan Frank, Mo Dowd, Yuko, Kevin Howard. Now this one I'm not sure about, so I'm going to take a stab. Thomas Strahi, Danny from the Show, Jackie, Jack, BoneCK, James Taylor, and Irina Volkova.